Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. If you're watching this, well, I fear the worst has happened. I don't know how much longer I have. YouTube has jailed my video again, and you're gonna have to check out the link in the description if you want to watch the full thing. Otherwise, what was that sound? Otherwise, you can just watch the analysis at the end of this video. Okay, thanks for supporting the channel, and enjoy the reaction and analysis. Uh, Yes, that's a nice little triplet thing going on there. That was phenomenal. Holy cow, that was 5 minutes, 6 minutes almost. Did not feel like it. Love that. Um, so yeah, this is an interesting way to cap off the week. I'm kind of happy that this is what we landed on as far as the end of the week goes, because it sort of acts as sort of all a demonstration and sort of a counterpoint to what I've been talking about this week. Um, so I talked a lot about pop being sort of an amalgamation of sounds. Not no specific words. I've mostly talked about it being dynamic in texture and timbre. But I kind of see those two things as being similar, where it's not so much about a single sonic idea. A lot of these songs we've checked out have varied up how the song sounds throughout. Not too dissimilar from some of the wild prog metal stuff we've checked out. I've kind of just made that realization. Specifically, I want to look at stuff like Between the Buried and Me. We checked out one song that was, well, Answer the Sky. Like every few minutes, we were in a completely different, tonally, sonically different atmosphere. It was still mostly guitars and drums, but I mean, we moved through so many things and we ended in a hoedown. So, I mean, you don't get much more diverse than that. Um, and I kind of see, especially when we looked back at stuff like 100 gecs, just constantly changing the way that the song sounds without actually changing the actual music. So, as far as looking at pop through the lens of music that redefines itself constantly through the use of texture dynamics, I think it's really interesting to look at this because I mentioned that I kind of see that this identity through texture change sort of stemming from the fact that a lot of pop music focuses on electronic sounds, and that allows them to have vast libraries of samples and virtual instruments, and not being constrained by physical instruments. Who's going to actually play them live? Lugging around all these instruments to all your venues and stuff like that. It removes all of those constraints, and you can make music with whatever sounds at any time as you like, from one sound to 100, whatever tickles your fancy as a producer or songwriter. You can do with no, not having to worry about how it's actually going to be performed live. And a lot of other genres that utilize physical instruments don't have that luxury. They do have to worry about personnel. They have to worry about, bringing instruments between um, sets and sort of the efficiency of it. Do we introduce, a one bar bell sound? Are we going to tote a xylophone to all of our stuff and make sure somebody can man it for this one bar just for that one bar of unique sound? And that's the kind of stuff you need to think about when you're writing for physical instruments that you don't have to worry about in pop. And I think it's really interesting we landed on this, where they tried to replicate a lot of those ideas. Not so much the texture work, but sort of combining a bunch of different things. even the simple idea of the vocal widening, right? Um, in a lot of pop songs, when you want sort of that wider, airier sound, we heard this in the Churches track. You're just going to basically layer your main vocalist or have them double up their recordings with slight variation, possibly, or like I said, just copy paste and put some reverb on it or whatever to widen it up. But if you're going to do that live, you need a choir. They had 5 or 6 people doing the backups to get that nice, wide, airy sound to go against her, strong single clean. Um, that's something that is very easily done in a DAW and a lot more difficult to replicate live. Um, just having a piano and a string section and a percussion section that is full of different percussions. We had the drum set, and then we had your auxiliary percussionist who had the bongos and the cowbell and the triangle and everything else. On a in a DAW, you just kind of set it up. You throw the MIDI in there and it just works. And here you really have to figure out who's playing what. How many people do we need? What is the space required? And it just goes to show that a lot of pop music tends to be, a single vocalist with the electronic music track behind them, at least as far as live performances go. And when you actually translate that to a live performance with physical instruments, there is a lot that you have to take in. And I'd be interested to listen to the original of this track, if there is an original. Maybe, this is the original sound, but if the original focused on electronic sounds and it wasn't done with live instruments, were there any textures or timbres or maybe any sort of modulations that didn't make the cut that were too difficult to translate, either because of physical reasons, maybe instruments just can't make the sound that they wanted or a sound that was similar enough to it, um, or maybe it just wasn't feasible with the amount of space or the amount of money they had to hire musicians to do it. All sorts of logistics that would go into translating a purely digital track to a physical one. Basically, how different does this sound, aside from the timbre changes that are going to happen from using electronic sounds to, acoustic instruments? Is there any differences aside from that? Um, and I think this just perfectly sets up a lot of what I've been talking about. Um, like I said, about how pop songs and pop writing specifically have a lot of freedom that isn't had in uh, playing with more physical instruments. Um, Aside from that, though, if we actually get into the actual music, there's a lot of really cool ideas in here. And some of this is going to stem back to what I believe is a song that started out utilizing samples and VSTs and was adapted into physical instruments. I don't know if that's true. Like I said, I don't know what the studio version of this song sounds like. I don't know if this was specifically, if this is how it originally sounds, or if this was sort of an acoustic instrument take on an original song. Um, but coming from that idea, it's really cool to see the violins kind of doing some of the things that we see pad instruments typically doing, where you have your swells and your abrupt stops, and the way that the notes are released both abruptly and sort of like a fade out. I think they did a very good job sort of replicating a lot of those pretty standard electronic pop sounds in the synth group. Phenomenal. Um, I do like the little touch they had. The drums were fairly simple. They had a nice couple of, accented offbeat snare hits, but for the most part, it was pretty standard, sticking with downbeats. But I do like the little bit of modulation that went into it to give it a bit of a digital sound. It definitely kept it sounding like pop music and less like pop rock. And I know that might seem like I'm splitting hairs, but I think that the sound of a acoustic snare and the sound of an electronic snare are very different and provide very different atmospheres to the music that's going on around it. I think having those digital-esque drum sounds really helped cement this into a pop sound rather than some sort of I don't know, funky big band. Speaking of that, which is just a strange combination of genres, I'm very impressed. I was talking about this a little bit in the middle, how almost every single instrument is sticking with downbeats and offbeats, quarter notes and eighth notes. That's really about it, and a lot of it is really about nailing home all four downbeats. Right? It has sort of a dance feel sound to it, where you're really emphasizing the downbeats so that the people at the club or whoever's dancing with it knows what the beats are. There's very little uh, temporal modulation going on in any of the work to really give it any sort of oddities in the time. However, we have we have a funky bass line going on. It is playing all sorts of accented I just blanked out on the word. um, we're getting some crazy accents though on offbeats and syncopation. That's what I'm looking for. We're getting crazy accented syncopations throughout. It just has a real nice funky flow to it, and it's in stark contrast to everything else that's going on in the music. And this is something that I think I'd like to explore a little more now that I'm actually getting um, adjusted to the idea of textural changes and sort of playing around with textures and timbres. I'm kind of wondering how much of pop music is also about borrowing ideas. Um, a lot of, every song that we listen to, I'm retroactively applying it to a lot of the pop music I've listened to and trying to see if there's any through lines to it. This week has been about me kind of for the first time exploring pop under a critical lens and, trying to understand any sort of, I guess you could say, a DNA to the genre. And something I'm really piecing together now that, like I said, I'm kind of coming to terms with the textural changes is influence. How many bands are, I mean, how many pop songs are sort of a hodgepodge of influences from all over the world, from all over the genres? Um, even in this one alone, we have sort of a funky bass line. It has sort of a Latin America feel to it. The drums are almost straight up something you would get out of an electronica song. We got some techno ideas there. The strings borrow a little bit from classical, even if the composition is not borrowing much. We are borrowing the sound of classical. We have the auxiliary percussion section providing timbres from all sorts of different ideas. And like I said, with the choir and the strings together and um, I was about to say brass. I don't remember seeing any instruments, any wind instruments in there. But for some reason I hear them when I remember the song, so I don't know on that one. But anyways, I mentioned at the beginning I kind of get like a big band feel out of this. So we got like funkiness and electronic and big band and classical all kind of coming together underneath extremely modern poppy vocals. They're catchy. They kind of fit in with a lot of modern pop songwriting techniques as far as vocals go. Kind of sitting around a single note, sitting within a single octave, and just kind of providing something rather catchy and simple. Right? There's not a lot of movement going on. And other than fun, I can't really say that there's any strong emotion in the in the lyrical delivery either. And it all just kind of fits into the fun party pop song that we've just heard a lot of over the past forever. um, and it's really weird that I'm kind of making all these connections. Like this piece comes from here, and this piece comes from here, and this piece comes from here, and it's all coming together into a song that I guess if you don't really think about it, it's just a pop song. But when you really get into it, you're like, oh, This is an amalgamation of a bunch of things, and when they came together, it sounds like pop. Right? So is pop anything, or is it just a conjoining of a bunch of ideas coming together, and the mishmash is pop? But the mishmash has to work. Like if you bring all these different parts together and it doesn't jive, then you don't have pop. You have a bunch of eclectic sounds that aren't supposed to go together. But I guess when you find that miracle combination, then it's pop. Like 100 gex, they put in almost like a pop rock or punk guitar bit to it, and it didn't sound out of place. It was still very poppy. Why? I don't know. I don't know what that miracle ingredient is that that kind of makes the desperate sounds sound poppy. I'm sure there is a combination when you just mix genres or ideas and it's not poppy. It is art house or experimental or something. I think pop is a very specific kind of coming together. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people say it's easy to write a pop song, and I typically argue that it is not. I think it's easy to write a song with pop style. I think it's easy to write a song with higher pitched vocals that kind of sit within an octave, and has a basic bass and drum beat under it. I don't think that's the hard part. I think the hard part is making it catchy. I think it's pulling in all these ideas and making them work together. I think it's changing your textures and timbres throughout and still creating a cohesive idea rather than a bunch of separate sounds, making a disjointed feel across your sections. I think it's a lot of mixing and mastering. I think the engineers don't get enough credit as far as pop music goes. Without them, you have songwriters who write a good song and you have singers who can sing well, but the catchiness, I think, is 100%. Not 100%, because your songwriter is going to do it. They're going to have some catchiness in the melodies they write. Your singer is going to have some catchiness in their delivery. But a lot of the work also goes into how the music sounds, and that comes down to your engineer. And pop music is just this big collaboration between a lot of people, and somehow it comes out sounding great and not like there were 100 hands in the cookie jar. Um, I don't know. This week's got me thinking a lot. Got me wanting. It has me wanting to explore a lot of pop music under this new lens. Maybe not continuing on being like heavy critical of it, but definitely thinking about it a bit more than just being that music that's in the background. Um, so yeah, those are my thoughts on Pop Week. I kind of went on a huge tangent, kind of in end of the week thoughts rather than specifically about Dua Lipa, though I did, make some mention about some of the cool things I heard in the composition itself. But also, I've mentioned this before, pop music is really difficult to talk about from the lens of a composer or specifically a composer because a lot of the musical elements are on the simplistic side. It's more about how the elements come together. And as we've explored, how the textures and modulation go about throughout the songs as well. There's a lot of layers in pop music that are not necessarily my expertise to talk about. However, I have had extreme fun this week. And I look forward to doing this again. I don't know how many people ended this week and said, yeah, let's have another pop week instead of let's get back to the metal. But that's kind of where I'm at. I'd like to do another week of these eventually. So yeah, hit me up in the comments. Let me know what you thought of Dua Lipa's Don't Start Now live in LA 2019. If you'd like, after you're done commenting, check out the description box for links adjacent to the channel, such as the Patreon if you'd like to help support the channel, or the Discord server if you'd like to join the community and chat with some other awesome people in the community. I don't know why I can't talk right now. There's links in the description. Check them out. There's some buttons under that to like and subscribe and stuff. You can click those if you like. I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC, with the next set of reactions. We're doing special selection this weekend. We do it every week. I don't know why I'm talking about like it's new. Every Saturday and Sunday, special selection. That's what we're doing. Tomorrow we got a band that a lot of people really enjoy. This is going to be like their 5th or 6th time on the channel. Not entirely by my choice. We've just had a lot of special selections for them, and they've kind of popped up a couple of times. So yeah, I enjoy them though. I'm not upset that they're on the channel again. They're just, I mean, 6 times I think is more than anything else we've done. And then Sunday is going to be something I have no idea what it is, but the thumbnail looks great. So, all right, until next time, you guys stay safe out there, keep being awesome, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.